the economy, our United States economy is driven by GDP. It's by spending money on goods and services. 70% of our economy is GDP driven. So as goes the consumer, as goes the economy.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. With us, economic expert, fellow attorney, Anthony Saccaro is with us. Anthony, great to have you back on. We're getting some economic numbers coming out of the think tank here, the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Commerce Department, all that. Consumer confidence. What does it mean?
Yeah, hi, Kerry. Thanks for having me back for sure. The Consumer Confidence Index report really talks about how consumers are feeling about what's going on today in the economic environment. It looks at what's going on today, how are they feeling today, and then a different index, the expectations index built into that report, has them looking at what they think is going to happen in the next 6 months. And it's ticked down since August by a couple of points. I wouldn't say it's necessarily meaningful, but it seems that confidence has waned. And you then really have to ask yourself, why has it gone down? Why is consumer confidence declining? Because the stock market's at all-time record highs. And I think it ties back to the labor market, and I think the housing market have something to do with it as well, too. Inflation is, stuck around 3, right? Just depending on the measure that you look at. And the Federal Reserve is kind of, in a little bit of a quandary because their target is 2. So we're 50% above their target. And yet they can't wait till it gets to 2 to start making action. They want to see it come down, but it actually hasn't come down. It's actually ticked up a little bit. The labor market, though, is where I think a lot of the issues are, both with the reason that inflation is sticky and also with regards to what the Federal Reserve has to do, because unemployment is starting to tick up at this point. I think the latest reading on unemployment is 4.3%. So it's not out of the range by any means. We're not, heading towards a catastrophe at this point with 4.3. There's nothing wrong with that. But it is starting to tick up, and under the Federal Reserve's mandates, right? It's keep inflation reasonable, keep employment reasonable. So with the labor market, a year and a half or 2 years ago, there were something like 2 jobs available for every 1 worker. Now that number is normalized. Now it's like a 1-to-1 ratio, and people are having a harder time finding jobs. But I had to give raises to my employees within the last couple of years, raises I normally wouldn't have given because they could go out and find another job because it was a very strong market. Well, that has to be passed on to the consumers. And if it's passed on to the consumers, that is a part of inflation that's sticky. Grocery stores can adjust their prices based on commodity prices at any given point in time. But, imagine what would happen, Kerry, if I tried to go back to one of my employees and say, hey, guys, sorry, I gave you a raise. That was when the labor market was tight. Now I got to take it back when everything's loosened up. It just doesn't work that way. So that's a part of why it's sticky. So the Federal Reserve has competing interests at this point. They've got unemployment ticking up a little bit, which they got to keep an eye on. And they have inflation that's sticky. And so what do? So they decided to lower a 1/4 point. It's expected that there'll be another 1/4 point or maybe 1/2 point by the end of the year, but they will be data dependent, as their favorite term is.
Okay, so but when all this is happening, the Federal Reserve has another mandate. It's a stealth mandate, and that is to never let the stock market go down, right? I mean, isn't that what it's all about? Because if the stock market's going up, then you can always say, well, the economy is doing great because the stock market's doing great. And you have the wealth effect.
Well, that's right. That's the Trump mandate part of the Federal Reserve, right? And it's interesting how he's trying to manipulate with Lisa, I think, and, get the, votes that he needs to have interest rates go in the direction that he wants. So you're absolutely right. It's not a mandate. And there really is a legitimate question as to whether Jerome Powell is buckling under pressure, whether the Federal Reserve really, does buckle. I think there's lots of different opinions across the board. I don't think they do, but I will say it's just an opinion. The wealth effect is interesting, too. The wealth effect is simply saying that when people feel good about things, then they spend money. And the negative wealth effect says when people don't feel good about things, they don't spend a lot of money. And consumers have still been resilient. The economy, our United States economy is driven by GDP. It's by spending money on goods and services. 70% of our economy is GDP driven. So as goes the consumer, as goes the economy. And throughout COVID, that time period, consumers saved a lot of money. There was a lot of free money given to them. And so they still have money to spend still, but the savings rates are going down. Debt rates are starting to climb. And so the consumer is starting to crack. And, that then causes the wonder as to whether or not are they going to crack so much at some point to where we are going to tip into a recession. We're not out of the recession woods yet. But there's also nothing there that tells us that we're going into one for sure.
All right. So, if you're a betting man like me to some extent, certainly we bet one through our portfolios and our personal wealth. What are the odds we're going into a recession here? Stock market crash. Give me a percentage.
Well, from research that I've done and looking at even over just the course of the last few days, economists and professionals are putting the odds of a recession at somewhere between 20 and 25% in the next 12 to 18 months. So that's what they're saying. So it's not a small chance, but it's also not a large chance as well, too. One thing I think that people have to consider, though, is that recession is not bad. It's almost like this R word, and the media makes it like we don't want a recession. Well, the reality is it's not true. There are booms and busts. There are good times and bad times in life. There are good times and bad times in business. There are good times and bad times in economics. And it's not bad when we go through a time where it just takes us a little bit of time to reset. Businesses get to reset. You get to set your personal expenses. Things can't go up all the time. It's just not the way life works. But we try to do everything we can to avoid a recession. And that falls back into the mandate of what the Federal Reserve doesn't want. They don't want a recession, and Trump doesn't want a recession because then it happens to fall on that president, and he would not get his third term, right? If there's a recession. So the reality is that it's not bad, but no one wants it. Everyone seems to be running away from it.
Right. So it's just that old saying, difference between a recession and a depression. Recession's when you're out of work. Depression's when I'm out of work. Difference between minor surgery and major surgery. Minor surgery is surgery that you have. Major surgery is surgery that I have. So, but I do agree with you that recessions are there to clear out the excessive speculation and to basically force liquidation of bad business decisions, because what looked good at 2% interest rates or no percent doesn't look so good at 5%. And all of a sudden, you have this come to Jesus moment where the debt just isn't sustainable. But speaking of debt, what about the national debt here? Shows no signs of abating, although maybe if we have a government shutdown and it lasts for quite a while, we can reduce the debt that way. The president's threatening to eliminate whole departments and basically get rid of hundreds of thousands of people, fire them. What he evidently under the shutdown legislation, he's got that right to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's defund the police while we're at it too. Go back to that movement that I don't even know if that's still around. But the reality is it's a silly thought, right? To just go fire everybody, you have to do it, systematically. If you are not. With that said, don't get me wrong. I think there was a huge amount of government waste. Doge. Getting rid of all that government waste, I think is a good move. But I know, you don't just go fire everybody. But we also know that Trump is a lot of, I don't want to say talk, I don't want to say hot air, because he's shown it, right? He's done what
he's bombastic.
Yeah, he is, and that's a great way of saying it. He's a negotiator, right? And that's a good start of negotiation. I mean, there were 150 countries that were going to have tariffs on, and they were all going to be this massive things. And the stock market dropped 3,000 points in a day, or whatever that was that happened back on Liberation Day. And then it just, I was interviewed on that day by some network I don't remember, and I basically said it's going to smooth all out. It's just a negotiation tactic, and that's exactly what it is. And now Trump, here he is, he's kind of gotten his way, and I feel like things are a little more on a level playing field. And he does talk a lot, but you and I both know as attorneys that a part of negotiation is talking and how you say something, right? You can say something in a believable manner or not, and he tends to be believable. So, of course, we do have a lot of trillions of dollars of debts. That's one of the arguments for why he wants the Federal Reserve to lower rates. For every quarter point that they lower rates, there's hundreds of millions of dollars in interest that are being saved, in that federal debt. So that's part of his argument. What I think maybe a lot of people don't understand, though, 'cause I get this question a lot from consumers, even clients. And that is that, by not having the taxes where they are, keeping them suppressed, which is, obviously individuals want that, but then it increases the national debt, right? The reality is that that the explanation I seem to have had to have a lot is explaining to people that, look, when you're productive and when you have an economy that's running strong and you have a lower tax rate, the dollar amount of taxes is actually higher, because you've got a strong economy. So a lower percentage of tax on a higher dollar amount equals a higher dollar amount. And I almost feel like sometimes people don't understand that. I'm in California, about as left as you can get. And so people tend to let their ideology and their political points of view, I think, kind of cloud their judgment as to realism. And the reality is that as we grow, you can still keep taxes low. You can still have a healthy, thriving economy, people working, inflation intact, low tax rates, and still be doing very well and eventually lower that debt. But it also takes time. I talk to people all the time that we put their money in certain investments, and 3 months later, they're asking me how my investments are doing. It doesn't work like that. This is the long run, and it's the same thing here. It's the long game. And the challenge is then one term expires, and now you get into another president with a different philosophy, and by the time they're just getting rolling, their term expires, and you don't seem to go anywhere. But, the stock market's at record highs as a result of that. And we do seem to be doing okay, so I'm not going to argue. But, I'm glad taxes are lower and staying low.
Sure. So, we got a couple of tax cuts that appeared in that bill. Number one was maintaining the tax cuts and the bonus depreciation from Trump's first tax bill. No tip on taxes, somewhat. No tax on Social Security, somewhat. And then I don't remember if they got it together or not. Did they raise the state and local tax exemption from 10,000 to 20, if I'm not mistaken?
40, I believe it was.
40.
Yeah. So it was a healthy, so it was a healthy raise that they did throughout that bill. And I was excited about that personally.
Sure.
But that did, and the other thing that they did too is they got rid of the windfall elimination provision and the government offset provision in Social Security. And if you're a teacher or government worker, you know exactly what that means, because they really were penalizing you on your Social Security if you had worked sometime in a private sector or the corporate sector where you paid into Social Security, but then you became a teacher and you were paying into CalPERS, or you became a government worker, you were paying into CalSTRS, the retirement systems for those different entities. And what would happen is if you got such a good pension from STRS or PERS, then they would ding you on the Social Security, which never really made sense to me, because why should you be rewarded over here and then penalized over here if the numbers work? And so they got rid of all that. That was under one of the tax bills that came out, I think it was January 5th of this year, that went into play. And the nice thing too is it wasn't an opt-in or opt-out. It happened automatically. So that they retroed it back to 2024. And so, the teachers and government workers got a check for the previous year and then, will not be dinged going forward. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And but that new tax bill kept rates lower, but they also added these other benefits as well, too.
So that's going to add to the debt, no doubt. But on the other hand, we got these tariffs, and they are offsetting. And effectively, the tariff, regardless who pays it, it doesn't matter. In the end, if it's not being paid by the consumer because the exporter ate it, basically, then theoretically the price could have been lower on those goods. So the consumer is paying it. And if they raise the price, then the consumer is paying it. effectively, it's almost a VAT tax or an import duty tax without having to try to get it passed through Congress.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the tariff tax gets passed down to the consumer, one way or another, especially when you position it kind of the way that you've positioned it. I don't know that, if there's a 10% tariff that, the product's prices go up 10% for the consumers overnight, because it might be eaten, in that that export process by the manufacturers and ultimately not come down to the consumer. But when you look at it from the other angle, that this means they could have had lower prices all along, then yeah, I guess that you could look at it as the consumer is overpaying. At the end of the day, though, it does get passed on to the consumer, and it certainly, it certainly could help offset the tax loss deficit that has been increased or that potentially will increase as a result of the tax bill. So I haven't studied those numbers to see what offsets the other and whether it's an equal reduction. But I do know the general underlying foundation that if you're growth oriented, you grow the economy, you incentivize companies to grow, then it works out really well, as opposed to government spending. Even within my own businesses, the fact that taxes are lower, I have employees, and I've had to make decisions in the past years of, do I pay the tax or do I hire another employee? It literally comes down to a decision, and I'm a small business. When those decisions go up to Fortune 500 companies, really that tax has the ability to urge companies to hire more people, which is great for the economy, more people spending, more GDP, and so on. Or those tax increases can cause layoffs.
It's the same thing like the Social Security tax. You see it as an employee and your paycheck, but your employer is matching it. And then it's like you're paying both sides of it. It's just you're not seeing the other side, because if your employer wasn't paying it, that money could be available for your paycheck, and you'd be getting higher earnings as a result. So the tariffs are kind of the same way. One other thing, DOGE, the Trump administration, announced that by January 20th, 2026, that's the anniversary of Trump's inauguration for his second term here, that they're going to be cutting 100,000 rules and regulations from the Federal Register, I guess, effectively the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, assuming they can do it, which I have no doubt they can, if the desire is there, using an AI tool to go through every single rule and regulation, all the outdated. What effect do you think that's going to have on the economy, Anthony?
Yeah, so when you mention 100,000, I'm thinking that's it. That's all.
50%. There's 200,000 regs. 50% of the regs go out the window. We've already seen with mining, highway projects, infrastructure projects, streamlining has, taken projects take 10, sometimes 20 years and moved them up to 2, 3, 4 years. So we got rid of half all the regulations and ignored the rest. Where does that leave us?
Yeah, the problem is that, these regulations exist because you and I know as attorneys that it's the letter of the law all the time, right? You can't have a subjective rule, because then companies are going to try to bend the rule. At least that's the idea behind having it. And that's why when you look at a contract that basically says you and I are going to do business and I'm going to pay you this and you're going to do this work, it has to be a 15-page contract that identifies everything. So the reality is that if they're going to cut these regulations, I mean, Trump's done that before, and it's worked out well. It hasn't been a problem. I don't think it's almost one of those trust but verify things. I think it does need to be well-rounded so that there are guidelines. As a financial advisor with Providence Financial Company I started 26 years ago, the SEC has some rules and regulations in there, but it's subjective. There are windows. So if you can't do anything deceitful, right? But deceitful is is subjective word. What's that mean, right? So it has to be within boundaries. And I think if the rules and regulations had more boundaries around them, I think that companies will abide with those boundaries, just like most financial advisors abide within the boundaries that they are given. And ultimately, it's great for the economy. Let us do our job, right? Let us get out there and serve the consumer. Let us get out there and help people. Are there going to be mistakes that we make? Yes. There are, in California where I'm at, the employment laws are absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. If I do one thing wrong, literally the employment laws can put me out of business just for a mistake. It's like the vehicle code. I was talking with the police officer the other day, and he threw out that there's like 15,000 codes in the vehicle code. And he basically said, oh, yeah, I know, right? And he said, you can't follow them all. It is impossible to follow them all. It's the same thing with employment law. It's impossible to follow them all with the new PAGA rules. And oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. And same thing, you hinder us from doing business. So many people are leaving, right? I think Elon Musk had left California, if I remember, because of the rules and regulations. Let us do our job. Let us go serve people. We're not out trying to screw everybody, guys. And I understand that there has to be some rules and regulations and that there are the one-offs. There are the Bernie Madoffs out there, right? But the reality is those guys go to jail. And when you calculate the percentage of one Bernie Madoff or however many of those individuals are relative to the several 100,000 advisors out there, what you're really doing is regulating everybody because of the one person, right? It's like the whole, one sailor is drunk on the corner and the whole Navy's drunk, right? And let us do what we got to do. So cutting the regulations, I think, is a healthy step for growth. If I know that I can go and hire someone, just realistic example, if I know and I can hire someone, and if they don't work out, I can fire someone, I will take a more chance on more people. But the fact is, firing someone in the state of California takes work, and there's a lot of liability there. So it comes back to hiring. I have a gal right now who I'm thinking about hiring that is potentially a liability if I have to fire her. So I may never hire her in the first place.
Yeah, just look at Europe. You can't fire anybody in Europe. In the EU, it's all but impossible. What Volkswagen's going through now, getting rid of 100,000 employees, is, the stuff of nervous breakdowns. So getting rid of these regulations, a lot of them are out of date. A lot of them are obsolete. They serve the contrary purpose to why they were passed. And a lot of them are illegal now under the repeal of the Chevron doctrine of basically giving deference to regulations that are passed by agencies, and kind of the courts looking the other way. Well, that's no longer the case. So we got real interesting things, because I think it's plausible that it could happen, and that could unleash a tidal wave of growth in the economy, couldn't it? Just compliance. Let's forget about not being able to do what you want to do, but just trying to comply with 100,000 regulations is billions upon billions of dollars, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. It's ridiculous. It's silly. And I think they should. I think they could. And I don't think a lot of people would notice. I think the employers will notice, the people that it affects. But I don't think there's going to be a negative. The positive is the economy is going to grow. We get out of our way, let us go run our businesses, and the economy is going to grow. That's for sure. That's going to be felt. But I don't think that it would be felt on the back end as any type of negative. What negative is going to come of that? I had to terminate a high level employee multiple months ago, and once we had let this individual go, the rest of my leadership team was looking around, going, "What did he do?" There was no hole. Normally, when you let someone go, there's a hole, right? It has to be filled. I don't think there's going to be a hole. I think there's going to be billions of dollars saved by companies like mine and, and other companies out there. I think there's going to be a net positive, but I don't think there's going to be a hole. I don't think anyone's going to be looking around going, oh my gosh, that regulation went, so now we can't. No, it's not going to work like that. I think it's just going to happen. The economy is going to grow as a result of it, and let's move forward.
I love it. Well, hey, from your mouth to God's ears, Anthony, just tell us, where do we find you? How do we connect with you on the web?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple ways. You go right to my website, anthonysaccaro.com. You go to providencefinancialinc.com, or just search for Providence Financial, Woodland Hills, California, Los Angeles, California. We come up all over the place. So thank you, Kerry.
Excellent. Hey, any questions, comments, shoot me an email, KL@KerryLutz. Anthony will give you an answer, I promise. And while you're at it, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for the free newsletter. We're on Substack now. No more maintaining websites and watching them break and slow down and get corrupted and all that good stuff. And sign up, like over 70,000 of you have done. Actually, it's closer to 80. and you'll get some useful information regularly. We promise you that. Anthony, appreciate you coming on. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Kerry. Glad to be here.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.